Today we are going to be making a chicken black bean soup, a herby chicken melt, and some banana donuts, since I have 4 bananas that really need to be used. So we're going to start up with our soup, and we're going to put in a little bit of olive oil in our Dutch oven, about 2 tablespoons of olive oil. And then I'm going to start warming up my pan, putting it on about a medium high. And we're going to start with 1 yellow onion. I'm going to chop off the ends of my onion, and then I'm going to make a nice, there we go, cut through. And we're just going to remove this whole top layer, just because it's kind of a pain to try to go through and pull off all the chewy brown skin. So I just take that whole top layer just to make it easier. And we're going to cut it in half. And then I'm going to do kind of a small dice on it. Go right over it. I kind of cut it 5 times one way, and now I'm going over and making a small dice. There's 1/2. So 1, 2, 3, 4 cuts. Make it into 5 pieces. And then we're just going to go over. There we go. And we are going to add this to our oil that is warming up in our Dutch oven, so we can start caramelizing and sauteing it. And then we're going to add in some minced garlic as well. And I'm going to put in about a teaspoon, and teaspoon and a half there, I would say. And let me get a spoon out, and we're going to give it a nice stir to coat everything up with the olive oil. And that way it can all saute together and get the garlic to let out its flavors, as well as the onions. There we go. Now let's prep the rest of our other vegetables that are going to go in here. I've got 2 big carrots, so I'm going to peel these and then chop them up. If you're using whole onions like this, you always want to peel them, because that outer skin is dry and has a slightly different flavor than the tender, juicy inside. So I always peel them. If you're getting baby carrots, you can just chop those up, because those have already been peeled and pre-washed. And you can also buy the pre-cut, like you can get these like pre-cut carrot like chunks also in the produce aisle. You could use those as well. So I'm going to chop off the ends, and then I'm going to cut each one in half just to make it easier to cut. And I'm going to quarter them, and then we'll chop them up. So they're not super huge pieces, because again, this is a soup, and so you don't want to have a huge carrot chunk on your spoon when you're eating it.
And what all are you making?
We are making a chicken black bean soup, a herby chicken melt, and some banana donuts, because we've got bananas that are ripe and ready. And today we had a snow day here in Tennessee, and my kids are home, so they're very excited about the banana donuts, because that's one of their favorites. I do believe have we posted that recipe card yet?
Yes.
Yes, so that recipe card is posted for our banana donuts on the link in our page. There we go. So I've got our carrots chopped up. I give my onions a nice stir. And then we're going to prep our celery. So if you were using the full stalk of the celery, use the leaves as well, because they add a really lovely flavor to the stew, as well as like a bit of bright green. But these already come like pre-roasted and chopped down. So I always cut off the very ends, because those are a bit more chewy and dry, because the liquid has kind of escaped from it. And then I'm going to chop these up into fairly thin slices. That way they cook up tenderly and are nice and flavorful. And go through. And I'm just holding my celery at the back so that I can cut it. There we go. Perfect. So we've got our celery and our carrots prepped and ready to go into our onion and garlic mixture. I'm just gonna wait until all of my onions are starting to become translucent because I really want them to get into a tendering in the beginning process of caramelization before I throw in my more vegetables, because they won't caramelize as nicely once you add more stuff in there. So I'm just making sure that they're starting to turn yellow and they're no longer white. So they're getting into that translucent stage. Okay. Just about there. I'm just gonna toss these in the trash.
You got a question? Butter for onions?
I use olive oil. So I most of the time in my sauteing, I use olive oil because butter tends to burn. The milk solids and the butter burns. Now, if you're using ghee or a clarified butter that has the milk solids removed to it, then it works well. But regular butter that you get from the store tends to burn a lot easier in sauteing, so I use olive oil. Okay, so now we've got them where they're no longer white and they're starting to get yellow. We're gonna add in our carrots and our celery, and we'll stir them up and saute them. Whenever I'm making soups or stews, I always try to saute up the vegetables. It releases out some more flavor and gives them a nice, like, kind of a crunchier shell on them so they don't go soggy in your soups or stews. Give it a nice stir here. Beautiful. And I just use my thing to break up any of the celery that is kind of sticking together. Okay, I'm going to turn down my heat just a little bit. And then I am going to add in some Fiesta Mexican seasoning. I think I got this from Whole Foods. I really like it. But it just has a little bit of chili powder in it. It has cumin in it, oregano, garlic, and onion powder. So it's just a nice blend of it. But you could also, like, if you're going to use it, like a half a teaspoon of chili powder, half a teaspoon of cumin. So I'm going to put.
What are you making?
We are making black bean, chicken and black bean soup. And we're going to have an Herby chicken melt and banana donuts. So I'm putting in about 1.5 teaspoons of my Fiesta chicken seasoning so I can really season up these onions and celery and
you have a question, is this like a chicken tortilla soup?
This is a chicken black bean soup. So it's slightly different. There's not going to be any tomatoes in it. And we're using black beans, and what we're going to do with them is we're going to use half of them. We're going to blend them up with some broth to make it like a cream that will mix into our soup, get a little thicker one. And then half of them will go straight into our soup. Okay, now I'm going to saute up my pepper. Fun fact, if your pepper has 4 edges at the bottom, it's a female. If it has 3, it's a male. And females are sweeter than males, and referring to pepper. But, so if I'm buying peppers, like to make stuffed peppers, I always buy the one with the 4 little prongs at the bottom, because they, A, stand up better, but they also taste better. And I'm gonna give these a simple dice. I always cut off the top to get out the middle, and then I push out the stem so I can use the stuff at the top as well, because I don't like any of it go to waste. There we go. And slice these through. Also, when I'm chopping up my peppers, I like to chop them from the inside versus from the outside, because it is much easier to cut through them on the inside versus trying to cut through that the skin on the outside. So I just cut through the inside first. You give this a quick stir. Beautiful. I'm going to turn it down just a little bit, and then we're going to give these a little dice. There we go. And dice these up as well. Perfect. So a black bean soup has a little bit different. It's a little bit different than a chicken tortilla soup. First of all, the color is more of a dark brown. and just a slightly different. There's less chili powder in it, I would say, so less of that kind of flavor and more of a oregano-y bean flavor.
I feel like we have a video of chicken tortilla soup.
Well, yes, I do two types of chicken tortilla soups, and I think we have both videos up. I do one that's more of a broth-based chicken tortilla soup, which is similar to Chewy's chicken tortilla soup, if you've ever had that. And then I also do a kind of a hearty chicken tortilla soup where you mix sour cream and cheese into it as well. And we got an escapee. Okay, we've got our peppers stirred in there, and we're sauteing. We'll add our corn in once we get the broth in. So I'm going to add in 4 cups of water, and then we'll do a good scoop of chicken bouillon. You could use chicken broth if you wanted to. I prefer chicken bouillon because I can get a little bit more punch in the flavor.
You have a comment that someone uses sofrita and chicken tortilla. I don't know what that is.
Yes, you could definitely use that as well. It's like a seasoned, like a vegetable type thing in a flavoring. There we go. Okay, we're gonna put in 4 cups.
Apparently it's a base in Latin cooking.
Yes, yeah, that's what I said. It's like you can get, I know like Knorr makes it, you can get it in there, but it's like, I want to say it's like a little base thing. You can actually, better than bouillon, they do make one. It's hard to find, but they do have one that I've been able to find before. I'm actually going to be using a little bit of smoky chipotle in mine with the chicken bouillon, so we'll give mock that as well. So let me get a spoon and scoop that in there. Okay, I'm going to do more of my chicken because this actually has a lot of kick to it. So we're gonna give a good size scoop. This is where most of your the salty flavor for your soup is gonna come in. I don't put in salt. I just use bouillon instead. And we'll stir that in. So that's my chicken bouillon in there. And then I'm going to use a little bit of this smoky chipotle, better than bouillon, which has really lovely flavor to it that I think works really well when you're doing broths because it blends really well. And I'm just putting in about a teaspoon of that, so not too much because it does have a little bit of a kick. And I'm gonna turn up my heat so this can start to simmer. And we're gonna let it come to a little boil.
We got a question from Kelly. She's asking where are the questions coming from. We're streaming on multiple platforms right now, so if you don't see the question on your platform, it's on one of the others.
Yes, that's why we try to say them out loud so that everyone can ask. Whoops, made a little splash. Okay, I'm gonna let this heat up for just a little bit. I want the broth to simmer a little bit before I add in my beans and my corn and my chicken. And what I'm gonna do with my beans is I'm use beans in a seasoned sauce. Now this is a hint, you don't want just plain black beans. You want them in the seasoned sauce. So I'm gonna put half of them in my little blender bottle with a scoop of broth, and we'll blend that up. And that's just gonna give a really richness to our broth of our soup. And then we'll have the rest of the beans be in there, so you got a little bean with every bite as well. And if you really love beans, you could double it and then do 2 cans. One whole can, one in there, and then one blended up. But my family is they like a little bean, not a lot of bean. Okay, let's see. I'm deciding whether we should, I think we're gonna prep the banana donuts in just a second. So let me plug in this is a donut maker. So this is what I use over in the oven, but my recipe card that I have on there allows you to do in the oven or in a donut maker. Donut makers are quicker, but I'm gonna preheat that. And I'm gonna just move some of this over here so we can do our recipe. Cooking them, we can do our grilled cheese. But this thing takes about 5 minutes to preheat, so we wanna get that going. Okay. I have 4 very ripe bananas. When you are making banana bread or banana donuts, you want your donuts to look practically black. That is when all the sugar in them have oxidized and have made them really sweet and their flavors come out. You don't want to use an unripe banana. And I'm gonna be using my hand mixer. I got a plug right over here underneath my counter, so I'm gonna plug that in. And then I'm gonna get my ingredients, which are just salt, baking powder. I've got cinnamon sugar for later, for putting them on them. 5 tablespoons of melted butter. And then we're gonna get our brown sugar and our flour. And then I gotta grab 2 eggs out of the fridge. So let me grab, I got my fridge right over here. We've got our stew. I'm gonna give it a little stir. Make sure it doesn't stick. Okay, so when making our banana muffins, we are gonna start with our bananas. I always like to give them a little squeeze in the banana peel first. That just makes them easier to mush up. But again, you want really ripe bananas so that they're super mushy to begin with. And sometimes if I have really ripe bananas but I'm not ready to use them, I'll pop them in the fridge. Then they'll turn completely black, because if you've never put a banana in the fridge, whether it is ripe or not ripe, like whether it's perfect to eat, it will turn black no matter what within 24 hours. So that's just all the gas, the ethylene gas escaping from it. So we got this mushy banana in here. Give this guy a good squeeze all around. And peel them open. Perfect. So very ripe bananas that you think that you would never want to eat on your own, but perfect for making banana bread or banana donuts. I'm going to give it a little mix. Perfect. You don't need much to mash them up, which is nice if you use an unripe banana or a banana like over here. If you use a yellow banana, no good. It won't be sweet and there'll be big chunks in it. It won't mix up well. We are going to add in 1 cup of brown sugar. And you don't need to it doesn't need to be firmly packed. So just 1 cup of brown sugar. Perfect. And then we're gonna mix it together with our mixer. You could also use a spoon if you wanted to. Hand mixer just makes it a little bit easier. So we're gonna mix it until it's kind of a soupy mess. The sugar is gonna start dissolving in the banana juices fairly quickly. So beautiful. So you see how it's already turned into a nice gooey mess? Perfect. So we're now going to add in our 5 tablespoons of melted butter. Most of my baking, I use melted butter. It gives a better flavor and more of a bakery texture to goods, and I just prefer it over oil. Give this a nice stir. We're starting to see it a little frothing. I'm gonna turn it down just a little bit, and we're gonna add in our 2 eggs. These are like $1 million eggs right now. I know my kids are like, oh, can we have eggs for breakfast today? And I was like, oh, well, we've got 5 kids, so that's like a dozen eggs for breakfast. And I was like, these are hard to come by. Are we sure we want eggs? Okay, let's give these a mix up. We got our butter and our eggs in here. I'm gonna mix it up nicely. Beautiful. Now we are going to add our salt and our baking powder. So let me go grab a measuring thing because I forgot to set that out. So we need 1 teaspoon of salt and 2 teaspoons of baking powder. So not baking soda. If you do baking sodas, it will like really poof up because baking powder is essentially baking soda mixed with cornstarch, while baking soda is just straight up, and that would give it a really big reaction. So we want 2 teaspoons of baking powder. So 1, 2. I'm gonna give this a quick mix before we add in our flour. That way the baking powder can thoroughly mix with everything. If you try to mix it all at the same time, it doesn't mix as well. Or if you wanted to, you could sift your baking powder and your flour together, but I just think that's an unnecessary step. There we go. Perfect. We're almost done. I'm gonna turn my soup. We're getting a nice frothy broth on it, which will be ready for our next part in just a second. And now we're going to add in 2 cups of all-purpose flour. So you don't want to use bread flour for this at all. You want just good old all-purpose flour. So 2 cups. There we go.
You got a question? Does the order of the ingredients matter for the donuts?
I always put in my flour last. So you could mix all of the wet ingredients together at the same time. You just have to really mix them well, and then add the flour. The flour is last because it is really hard for the baking powder to get thoroughly mixed in if you add it all together at one time. So you could just do everything but that. And we're just gonna mix these up. There. Beautiful. And we have our lovely banana donut. I'm gonna get a little spatula and do my little scoop around the end to get this last little mix in. But because we use butter in our batter, it is a little bit thicker than if you were to use an oil base. That's because butter congeals fat. It does congeals while oil does not. But they make for a much better one. Okay, let's put our first batch in. Let me move these ingredients out of the way. And I'm gonna get my non-cook spray. Even though this is a griddle, I always spray it just because you don't want to deal with one sticking just in case. So, I like to use this, the pan baking one, because it has a little bit of flour in it, and it just means for a nicer non-stick. But you can also just use oil or plain one if you want. And just a light.
You got a question? 3 black bananas, 1 cup brown sugar, 5 tablespoons of butter, 2 eggs, 1 teaspoon salt, 2 teaspoons baking powder, 2 cups of flour.
4 bananas, not
4
3.
bananas.
So you want to use 4 bananas, unless you have really large
But the
ones.
rest of that was correct?
Yes, everything else was correct there. Let me get a spoon, and we're going to spoon this in there.
And we do have that recipe card up through the link on our page. You got to go to the post because we posted them as pictures so everyone could see them clearly.
Yes. So then you're just going to spoon, and you're going to just put enough in to cover it. You don't want to overflow it. It's going to pop up, but if you overflow it, then your donut will overflow a little bit. So just enough to cover the top of them. It's a thick batter, but it's really easy to scoop in there. And when my kids help me make these, especially my 3-year-old, he loves eating the batter.
You have a question. First one was how much butter? It was 5 tablespoons
Five
melted.
tablespoons of melted butter.
And then your other one, what do you do if you don't have a donut maker?
You can do a donut baking tray. So you need one of those. So you either have a donut maker or a donut baking sheet.
Could you do muffins?
You could
or is that different?
Well, you could do muffins, but then they would be flat. And I don't know, it would bake up like a muffin. It wouldn't bake up like a donut. But you could do it in a muffin pan. It's a very similar recipe. And it has the eggs and the baking soda, so it'll rise. So I've got these in here. They need about 2 to 3 minutes in there. If you're doing them on a baking tray in the oven, it is set it at preheat to 350, and it takes about 17 to 20 minutes to bake through. That's why I love this, because it's like 3 minutes. They're really quick. Okay, now let's move on to the second part of our stew, and then we're gonna make our melts. So what I'm going to do right now is, you want your black beans in a seasoned sauce, because that's gonna give you a little extra flavor, and you're gonna use some of the starchiness in here. I'm going to put half of my can with the seasoned sauce in here. And then we're gonna scoop, I'm gonna get a ladle and I'm gonna scoop up some of this warm broth. And we're gonna blend them together for our soup. There we go. And that's just gonna give you a nice kind of thick blend. And we can put the rest of these beans in here. So this is not a can. Most of the time I'm always like, you gotta wash your beans. But because we're doing it in a seasoned sauce, we want that flavor in there. And I'm just gonna put my lid on. I have my blender right over here so it's not so loud for you guys. And I'm just gonna blend it for about 30 seconds, not long. So it turns into a light brown kind of broth. And we're just gonna add this to our stew, which is just gonna give it a really lovely flavor to our black bean stew. Again, if you really like beans, you could double it and use 2 cans where you put 1 whole can in and you blend 1 can up. But my kids are a little less of a bean family than some people. They'll tolerate them. But you know, one day eventually they'll like them. Okay, let's start on our chicken real quick for our melt. Okay, let me get a knife. I have a chicken breast left over from when we did our chicken cutlets the other day, our Italian breaded chicken cutlets for our basil pesto spinach pasta. So we're gonna use this for our thing. So I'm just gonna cut it in half the lengthways, using right down, and then we're gonna just pound it out a little bit thinner so that we can saute it up. And this is gonna go in between our melts on our sting. So we've got our chicken right here. You can smell the bananas donuts cooking. This is a meat tenderizer, and I'm just gonna pound it up. And this is just gonna make it a little bit thinner so it cooks up nice and easy. Clean hand. I'm gonna use my clean hand. I'm gonna put a little bit of Worcestershire sauce on it, just a teeny bit. The acidity is gonna keep your chicken really tender. So just a splash on both right here. Then we are going to add a touch of, this is Mrs. Dash's onion and herb. It has a lovely flavor to it. We're gonna add a little bit over the top. And then we're gonna add a little bit of oregano. And then a dash of garlic salt. And I'm gonna flip them over, and we're gonna season, do the exact same on the other side. And this is gonna give our chicken a really herby flavor that we're gonna saute up. Nice little spread it out.
You got a question from Billy. Is it okay to leave the silicone spoon in the soup?
Yes, silicone is food grade worthy, meaning it can be heated up to 550 degrees. You can bake in silicone if you didn't know that. There's actually a lot of baking things in it. So this is from Williams & Sonoma, and it's a food grade. It's not hard plastic, meaning you can keep it in there.
But if it was hard plastic,
yes,
you would
hard
take
plastic
it out?
I wouldn't put in there because hard plastic is not heat tolerant. It can do things for stirring, but it's not heat tolerant. So here's our chicken that we have going there. I'm gonna wash my hands real quick. There we go. I'm gonna turn on my skillet right here, and we're gonna put a little bit, telling us that they're probably not having school again tomorrow for our 1.5 to 2 inches of snow. That is the south here. So I've got my olive oil heating up. I'm now gonna get a plate and check on my donuts. Okay, so let's see how they're looking. I always just peek them out. Perfect. I'm gonna get a fork and pop them out with a fork. See, these are so easy to make. They're just so easy. We'll just pop them out. They're not super hot, but people always tell me that my hands can like play with lava. And then I'm going to just spray again. Don't need much, and then we're gonna scoop in our dough. And just again, enough to cover it. You don't wanna over scoop it because then you'll have an overflow. Like if you've ever made waffles before and you put too much batter, it will run out the sides. That can happen with this as well. So don't over scoop it. One thing that's nice though is that it's a thick batter, so it's fairly easy to scoop in here. And I just use a kitchen spoon like this, one that you eat with, the large one, and just 1 scoop of this is all you need. There we go.
I get a comment, they look like donuts. Do they taste like donuts?
They taste like a cake donut.
Yeah.
So they are not like a yeast donut. And then what I do with room temperature butter, I run these over the top of each one so that the butter melts. And then while they're hot, you gotta do it while they're hot because then you don't have to melt them. But they taste like a banana bread donut, essentially. And then my trick is, what I do is, in here, I'll see if I can take the lid off, is a mixture of cinnamon and sugar. We use cinnamon sugar on toast, everything. So I have a recipe. You can do a teaspoon of cinnamon with a 1/3 cup of sugar for this. I misaligned these. But once you do your melted butter over it, you're just gonna shake on your sugar, just like this. And that's all, they're ready to eat. We'll cook them up. These go like crazy. This batch makes probably, I wanna say close to 20, and I left them cool down a little bit. Close to 20 donuts. Okay, my oil got a little hot, so I don't wanna put my chicken in here yet. I want it to cool down. I'm swirling it, there we go. And we're gonna saute up this chicken. Let me get some tongs. Now our chicken, we pounded it out nice and thin so that it will cook up nice and fast. Beautiful. Perfect. Smells yummy. And while our donuts are over there cooking, let's prep our bread. Okay, this is the rosemary and garlic loaf we made the other day. So we baked it last night if you were with us. We cut into, we all had some in some of our other ones. It smells fantastic. I thought this would go great with an herby chicken. So I'm gonna get my bread knife. A bread saw, I upgraded to a bread saw. It really does make the difference over my Woostoff bread knife. Beautiful. These are searing up lovely. Beautiful. There's like a nice crispy flavor on it. Okay, so now I'm gonna cut our bread. And this sourdough is so like soft and...
You have a question? What was the seasoning on the chicken?
The chicken, I used oregano, Mrs. Dash's onion and herb, and garlic salt, and Worcestershire sauce. So, and I just used a good helping of it because that will really flavor the chicken. Okay, so let me put our bread right over here. So here is our lovely bread. Let's check on our chicken. Sauteing up beautifully. You get that nice golden crust on it. I'm going to turn it off and we're just going to let it sit in the heat. That's the beauty of cooking it and hammering it out thin, that it cooks really fast. Okay, let's prep these ready. We'll change that. I'm going to take a little bit of room temperature butter and we're going to spread them on one side of our bread. You don't need a whole bunch, just enough to kind of melt and crisp up. There we go. A little bit more. Okay, but before we move to this next part, let's look at our donuts, see if they're ready for the next part. I'm gonna pull this off. Perfect. And see how they're cooking. Perfect. Nice golden. So pop these off. And they are hot coming out. I can handle hot temperatures fairly well. If you can't, just use your fork and pick them up. Perfect. I'm gonna do again a little spray. And then we're gonna spoon in our batter. Just like this. And you could have this recipe if, like, we're a big family, you know. I have 5 kids, and then I also cook for my parents. So we cook for about 9 people every day. So this only lasts a ton, but you could have it. It does make about 20 or so donuts, so you could have it to make a smaller batch.
You got a question? How did you make the donut dough?
This is, I think we have the recipe posted, but it was 2 cups flour, 1 cup brown sugar, 1 teaspoon salt, 2 teaspoons baking powder, 5 tablespoons melted butter, 2 eggs, and 4 very ripe bananas. And give our black bean soup a stir. Perfect. And before let's add in our icing. So I've got about a cup of corn I'm gonna add to it, frozen corn. We're gonna give that a nice stir. And then I'm using some hand-pulled rotisserie chicken. You can get this from Costco, but if you bought a rotisserie chicken or you had leftover chicken, you could use it. It doesn't have, it could be, you know, a chicken thigh that you've shredded, or a breast if you wanted to. We're gonna get a good handful of this, and then we'll save the rest because this is like almost 3 pounds. We don't use all of that. Okay, so I'm gonna put this over here so I know to put it back. And then it comes in some fairly big pieces, so I just like to go over and a quick chop over it. It is pre-cooked and everything, so you don't have to worry about that. This is also great for making like homemade chicken salad sandwiches. I use this stuff in so many different recipes. It's just great to have on hand. Okay, and then I'm gonna add it in my soup. I don't add it earlier because pre-cooked chicken, especially this, can get really stringy if you cook it very long. So I always add it towards the very end. We're gonna give this a nice stir. Beautiful. And then, okay. And then, I forgot, let's butter these donuts up while they're still hot. You can see you gotta use room temperature butter because it will melt nicely. If you're using cold butter, it won't. You could also melt butter and just dip the ends in, but then your banana donuts are gonna absorb a bit more butter. And they don't need much butter. You just want enough for it to hold on the cinnamon sugar that we're sprinkling on. And these are, the cinnamon sugar is really what like takes them over the edge. It makes them so nice. Okay, let's move on to building our things. We're gonna put these down. Let's see, we've got them buttered face down. And then for mine, I am a little bit more bougie in the way I like to eat things. I'm gonna add a little bit of pesto on my sandwich. My husband, he's not as bougie. Okay, So just a little bit of pesto. It's gonna go really well with this garlic rosemary bread. There we go. Then
you have a question? Can you use cake mix and add to it? I guess for the
like cake flour or cake mix. So cake flour you could, but you have to use a little bit more because cake flour is really finely sifted flour. So you could use cake flour, but if it's cake mix, I mean you could. It would change it. And I think you'd have to alter your ingredients some. So I'm gonna put on Gouda for mine. I love Gouda cheese, so I'm gonna use that. It's kind of a mellower cheese, so the herby flavors will, the chicken will really stick through. And then my husband, he's gonna have some smoked cheddar on his. And he'll have a little bit of smoked cheddar and some Gouda will do. I'm gonna break it up. The key with our grilled cheeses is you really don't want your cheese to overlap your bread, otherwise they will melt over and burn. Now for my husband, here we go. We've got this lovely, nice brown crust. We're gonna lay it across. And I've got mine. We're gonna lay it, look at that lovely brownish crust. It's gonna be so delicious. And then I'm going to add to mine some sun-dried tomatoes because I love sun-dried tomatoes. Perfect. Give my hands a quick wash. And before we do the next step, I think our donuts might be ready. Okay. Let's see. You can kind of hear them sizzling. Perfect. Look at that. We've got lovely golden brown. If you have a donut maker and you open it up and they're still pale, then they're not cooked. Also a good way to kind of like with a waffle maker, if you no longer see the steam coming out of your maker, that also means they're done. Okay, a little quick spray, and I think we'll get our last batch in. Beautiful. Now we're getting down to the very end. But yes, I guess if you do not have a donut maker or a donut baking sheet, you could put these in like a muffin tin with liners and bake them, and they would essentially be a bit denser of a banana muffin. It would be like a banana bread muffin. So that would work as well. But the donut shape, it makes them cute. Perfect. Okay, we'll close this up. And then I'm gonna take my room temperature butter while these are still hot. And we're gonna just rub it over the edge.
You gotta comment, you're good at multitasking.
Yes, it is. I feel like when you have a big family, you learn to multitask because you're constantly doing 20 million things at one time. And I think it helps that I came from a big family. I'm the youngest of 10, so I'm used to multitasking and doing things. We were blended, so family. So my mom had 7, but my father had 3 prior to my marriage to my mom. So I have my older half brothers. They're like 20 years older than me. But we get along great, and they're pretty sweet. Okay, well, let's work on this. I'm gonna turn on my skillet so these bad boys can start cooking while I finish them off. Okay, so we're gonna layer the smoked cheddar on top of this one, and then he's gonna get a little bit of Gouda just to finish it off. And there's his. And then I'm gonna put my Gouda over as well. And again, I'm making sure my cheese doesn't really go over the edge because that will be much harder for it to, it'll burn on your skillet. And then I'm gonna put a little bit more pesto on the inside of mine. And I'm using our sourdough bread that we made the other day that we used roasted garlic and rosemary in it, thank you. Okay, let's finish off our soup. Perfect. I'm gonna flip mine over since we were cutting the chicken there. So I have some fresh cilantro here. I washed this when I first got it. I use a little bit of it at a time. So we're good. And then I've got my green onions. We're gonna give them a little wash. Okay. We're gonna save some of it for garnish and some of it's gonna go into our soup. Okay, so we're just gonna finely chop up our green onions. I'm gonna put the stalkier part or the whiter part in my soup because they have a stronger onion flavor. And then I'm gonna use the darker green tips of the stems for garnish. That way they'll be a bit more tender and their flavor's a little bit more mellow, which is better for when you don't want it to have cooked. So we're gonna put this into our black bean soup and then we'll reserve the last part. I'm gonna give it a nice stir. Beautiful. And now we're gonna mince up our cilantro. If you don't like cilantro, feel free to omit this part. I find that it adds a nice flavor to it, but I do know a lot of people think cilantro tastes like dish soap. So feel free to omit it. I find if you grow your own cilantro and pick it fresh and use it fresh, it has less of that dish soapy flavor. And you also don't want to use dried cilantro. Dried cilantro goes by another name. It goes by coriander, and it has a completely different flavor profile. Okay. So we're gonna save some of this for garnish. We're gonna put the rest of this into our stew, which is cooking nice and low. And I'm gonna give it a nice stir. We'll let it simmer. Let's check on our banana donuts. And then we'll check on our grilled cheeses next. Perfect. You see these got a little overflow right there? That's I overflowed them a bit much, but here's the beauty of it. You can just cut it away. And you'll still have a perfect donut. Okay. Top these guys off.
And this recipe made what, 20?
Yes, 20 donuts. Pull that off. I'm gonna turn off, and then before we butter these, I'm just gonna go check on our grilled cheeses over there because I don't want them to cook up too much. I do 2 flips on my grilled cheeses so that it cooks on each side twice. The first one is to melt the butter and warm it up, and then the second time, I lost part of my cheese in that flip. Let's put them back on there. Perfect. And the second flip is for getting the nice rich color. So I'm gonna toast these up both twice on here so that it gets a nice rich color the second time, but I wanna heat up the bread and the cheese.
Yeah, you got some comments that other people do that, say it works a lot better to flip it twice.
Yes, it does, because the first one is really to heat your bread up and start the melting process of your cheese, while the second is to give it that nice golden crisp and like crunch to it. So I'm using room temperature butter, and we're just melting it over the tops of each one. And now we've got our donut stack. And then my cinnamon sugar mixture. We always have cinnamon sugar in a shaker because my kids love bread with cinnamon sugar, bagels. There we go. This is our banana donuts, and I will pop one of these hot guys open for you guys. You see how it's tender and moist in there. You can see the steam coming off, but they are absolutely delicious. They are definitely a favorite. Okay, see if they're ready for their next flip. Okay, this guy is. And now...
Got a question. What's the donut maker? Is that a Sunbeam?
It is a Sunbeam. I have had this donut maker for maybe 15 years. I've had it forever. I think I got it at Target or whatnot. I'm sure you can find one on Amazon or whatnot. It was one of those things that I used when I used to teach. We did a lot of cooking projects in the classroom, and a donut maker is great because you don't need an oven, so the kids could cook and make things, and then we would have donuts for snack with them. Okay, so we've got this guy cooking. This guy's ready for his next flip. Okay, now we're gonna cook the both sides for the lovely golden brown color that we want in the melting process. I'm just gonna clean up this area so that I can get ready to plate these guys in just a second. But for those of you, these are our Herby chicken melts. So we took one chicken breast, we just cut it right down the middle, and then I used a meat tenderizer to hammer it out thin so it would cook up really fast. We seasoned it with Worcestershire sauce, just a teeny bit. You don't want to put too much, but the acidity in this is going to keep your chicken nice and juicy. We used a little bit of Mrs. Dash's onion and herb, which is a salt-free mix. It's actually worked. Oregano, love oregano. It's one of my favorite spices. And then garlic salt. For mine, I made mine bougie, and I added some sun-dried tomatoes and a little bit of pesto.
And the bread is different.
Yes, the bread is, we made it, this is our sourdough bread, but we added rosemary and garlic to it. And after we mixed all the ingredients and we let it sit for 30 minutes during that first fold that you do with making sourdough, that perfect. We got a lovely crusting on that side. Beautiful.
And you got a question about the donut dough yet again?
Yes. So our donut dough is 2 cups of flour, 1 cup of brown sugar, 1 teaspoon of salt, 2 teaspoons of baking powder, 5 tablespoons of melted butter, 2 eggs, and 4 mashed bananas, really ripe bananas. They want to be almost black. Okay, I think we are just about ready to plate this up, so I'm going to get a plate and a bowl, and we are going to serve. Got my plate.
Oh, you got a question. What's the pan you're using? I think
Yes.
the Hexclad.
This is a Hexclad skillet, non-stick skillet. I recommend. I think
Griddle.
It's a griddle. Yes, it's a griddle plate. It's great because it's low down, so you can easily swipe your spatulas underneath it. These are perfect. So I'm gonna turn this off. I'm gonna put mine on here. Only one will fit, and then. There we go. And now I'm gonna do our soup. We'll scoop up our soup in just a second. Let me get my ladle. This is our black bean soup. But it's mild on the beans, I will say. But if you like a lot more beans, you can add a whole nother can in there. Scoop it up. We've got our rich broth that we blended some beans into. And then I'm gonna top it with a little bit more green onion and some fresh cilantro. You could also add cheese to it if you wanted, avocado chunks or whatnot. But that is our lunch today. Well, guys, thank you for joining. Don't forget to like and subscribe. We try to do live cooking shows every single day. We had a lot of fun. We made our banana donuts, we made our soup, and we made our yummy chicken melts in like hardly no time. Again, thanks for joining us. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Also, feel free to send us messages if you have any recipes or cooking questions. Thanks again.